Alan, Julie, thank you guys so much for being a part of the show once again. I feel like this is like the podcast marathon. We are getting a ton of conversation time with you guys around this incredible tool, the Enneagram, which I'm becoming a huge fan of. I love it, as I've said already on a previous episode. I love the fact that it's not a test to just take, but it's a tool to use on a journey, and I love that. So today we're talking about the triad that we refer to as the gut center. So it's going to be types 8, 9, and 1, which I'm pumped to talk about because, Julie, you've been going over the summaries basically of each of the types, and today we're talking about your type. So I'm super stoked to hear from you about that. But hey, before we dive into each of the types, 8, 9, and 1, Julie, can you just give us a quick overview of why do they call it the gut center? What's the triad, kind of the makeup of this triad together?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times people say they can understand the heart center and the head center. That makes sense to them. And then they're like, what the heck is the body center or the gut center? What does that even mean? So I would say our body center types, they are typically processing life first through, a sense in their gut, their intuition, before they go to their head or their heart, right? So because this is a tricky one to understand, I snagged a quote from a famous Enneagram teacher, Russ Hudson. He says this about the body center. He said, the gut center is teaching us what it means to actually live in the here and now, to feel our existence, and to operate from that. And that gives us a sense of confidence, fullness, aliveness, and being. Okay. So I wanted that to be a little reference point to help people understand, like, what is this gut or body center telling us? And again, as I said every time, like, we all have all three of these centers, right? It's just, where do we go to first? So our head center types tend to go first to thinking, our heart center types tend to go first to feeling, and our body center types tend to go first to doing, right?
Okay.
So I'd say body
center. Julie, so when we say gut or body, would it be people actually from a physical sense, or more of that kind of, hey, I made this decision because my gut told me to? Do you hear what I'm asking, honestly, the difference there, or is it the same?
Yeah, it could be either, because the ironic thing is sometimes the center that we operate out of, through our number, sometimes we are very out of touch with that, with our truest sense of being. So there could be body types who feel very out of touch with their body, but tend to have a sense of like a gut feeling and intuition that they just believe and they trust.
Yeah. Okay.
And that isn't limited to only body types, but that tends to be the place where they sit, so yes. I can think of, plenty of times in my life where people have asked me, well, how did you know this was the right thing to do? And a lot of people say, well, I thought about it and blah, blah, blah. Well, I really felt like, and I have always sensed like, I don't know. I just knew that this was what I was supposed to do, or that this was the right path to take, or that this was the right person to choose.
Like marry me.
Yeah. It was just my gut. My heart and my mind told me not to do it, but my gut said go.
I had some indigestion.
Luckily, she wanted to eat some tacos, and her gut said yes, and the rest is history.
So are we talking, Julie, like the high eyes on, say, like a Myers-Briggs, that very high intuition type of thing? Is that what we're talking about?
Potentially, but there are also, I've seen a lot of crossover with, if you look at the Myers-Briggs type indicator, there's some patterns and some themes into which types tend to be which numbers, but I've also seen, few select people who are just all over the board with those. So sometimes it depends. They can be fun tools to lay over each other. That's for sure. But yeah, I would really say, like, each of our centers are trying to ask a question, right? Find out information from the world. Our body types, they really desire autonomy, right? That feels very important to body types. And they're really asking the question, like, am I getting what I want? Am I getting what I need? Can I act the way that I want? Like, can I exist in the world the way that I feel pulled to? That's kind of the
okay.
overarching question that they're asking.
Yeah.
Body center types really want to feel like they're having an effect on the world.
Yes.
And they do that in different ways. But like we talked about our dominant emotion of like our heart center types going to shame and our head centers going to fear. Body types, the dominant emotion that they're going to wrestle with is anger. And sometimes that can even tip over into the rage scale because of this sense of I'm not feeling allowed to exist the way I want to exist. And that makes body center types feel very frustrated. So our 8s are usually going to externalize that anger. When they are angry, you are going to know it.
No.
And our 1s tend to internalize that anger, whether that be self-criticism or just this underlying, resentment or frustration that other people don't care as much as they do. Yeah. And our 9s are really just in a lot of denial of like, anger, what anger? I'm not an angry person. But really what they're trying to do is this back and forth of like, I got to keep in anything that could potentially cause conflict. Like, don't say it, don't let it out. And then I got to keep out anything that people are trying to throw at me that could disrupt my peace.
Because they want that harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just a tiny little snack on what our body types are all about.
Totally. And we're going to get to, if you're, for those that are listening or watching on YouTube, hey, we're going to get to a question at the end of today's episode where I asked Julie and Alan to share with us some resources that you guys have found helpful. And we'll provide all that in the show notes. So it really is, Julie, you're giving us a little taste, whetting our appetites so that we can then dive into this a little bit more deeply. So I'd love to transition now to each of the types. And we're going to start with the 8, which I believe I've heard some people describe as the challenger, as somebody that, like you said, can be a great leader, but can also, struggle with being a challenging person. So let's dive in. What are some of the key characteristics of an 8? And then let's talk a little bit about relationships and their goal achievement and obviously soul care. Yeah.
So our 8s, I used to call them the challenger or the boss, but I've also heard recently, and I really like this better, but in addition to, is the title of the protector. Okay. Because that is the big thing about 8s, is that they have a boldness, a strength, and intensity to them. And especially when they're healthy, and even sometimes when they're not, their intuition tells them to use that strength to protect the vulnerable, right? To root for the underdog. To be that bold, strong person who will speak out against tell the hard truth, speak out against the thing that's not okay. Yeah. So essential qualities for our 8s are strength, aliveness, and immediacy. Right? Those are all things that feel very essential to who they are. Their superpower really is truth telling. Like, they're not afraid to say the hard truth. The thing that needs to be said and no one else wants to say it, you look at the 8 and they're just going to spit it out.
So people pleasing would not be as strong of an element for these guys
I would say no. I wouldn't think so, just because their thing is truth and bold truth and fighting for justice and doing the right thing. And so if they, if you ask an 8 how your butt looks in those jeans, like, they are going to tell you. Careful. And then if you get offended or cry because of their straightforward answer, then they're thinking, why the heck did you ask me if you didn't want the truth? Right? So they are truth tellers.
Good. So good. Yeah. Would they even, Julie, be truth tellers to a fault in this sense that if they believe in their heart of hearts that something's true, they're just going to let it out into the world, whether or not they maybe have checked all the facts or maybe seen both sides of the equation?
So I can answer this. 2 things determine this. Number 1, discernment, which is just, wisdom and action. Have they learned to be discerning that over the years, that doesn't go well when I just grip it and rip it? Yeah. And the second one is health, right? So every number, we could say in health, there's such a huge difference between any number in health. But I think for an 8, you're going to feel that. So there are people who are 8s who I know and love, and who I realized after a while, wow, I really respect the way that they lead their teams and they lead their organizations, because they actually temper themselves and put other leaders around them. So I don't want 8s to just get caged as an irresponsible, throw it out, say whatever you want on social media, you know, like preach and just bear down. That's not necessarily the 8 in health. So I want to clear that up is that truth is powerful, but can be delivered with discernment and in health in a way that you may not even know somebody's an 8 because they've learned to live that wisely.
Yeah. I asked that question only because I know personally a very well-known 8 who oftentimes puts things out on the internet. And I oftentimes think to myself, well, yes, that is true, but there's also a flip side to that. And obviously they're wise enough to say, hey, I'd like to know your thoughts on this. So comment below and let me know what you think as well, which I think is fantastic because I think they are coming from a place of health. But I just wondered that sometimes if that's part of the reason why they can, in a sense, seem dogmatic, even though they may not be necessarily.
Well, because we all know if you say something with boldness and confidence, whether it's true or not, people are likely to believe you.
Yes.
Right? So it really depends on what is their motivation for speaking the things they do. And it's two sides of the same coin, right? And an unhealthy 8 could be a bully, right? But a healthy 8 could be an advocate.
Yep.
So
no, it's fantastic.
That self-awareness is
I love that.
Huge.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So we talked about having an emotional drive or a vice. And for our 8s, it's called lust. We're not talking about a sexual lust. We're talking about this lust for intensity, for control, for strength. They want to exert themselves. It's really about feeling alive, right? That is a big craving of theirs. So while they are very protective of the weak and vulnerable, 8s themselves never want to appear weak or vulnerable.
Okay.
Right? That's a hard place for them to live in. They want to be the strong ones who are in control, getting stuff done.
Yeah.
So and because of that link to anger, because anger to an 8 feels like a safe emotion because it's powerful. It's, you know, it's big. And it helps them feel alive and intense. Yeah. And so sometimes if an 8 is feeling an emotion that to them feels weak, whether they're, you know, hurt or grieving or sad, lonely, embarrassed, whatever, typically they might express that first as anger.
Okay.
Because that feels safer to them.
Yes.
Right? I'm not going to be weak. No one's going to take advantage of me. I protect
I'm in
the
control,
vulnerable, but I'm not vulnerable.
Yeah. And anger is almost, it is kind of a sense of control. I'm controlling this situation through my anger, even if it's controlling my feelings in a sense, by being angry. Yeah.
It's interesting too. Like this was helpful for me to learn that 8s don't necessarily need to be in control. They just need to not be controlled.
Okay.
So in a social environment where there's no power play at work, an 8 might not rise up, but as soon as the 8 feels manipulated or controlled, and I've been in a relationship with an 8, a close friend of mine now, but as we worked together, it was strange how it was so relaxed when there was no power at play. But as soon as there was, it was like there was a challenge that had to go in place. And so that's interesting. They don't necessarily need to be in control. The desire is more not to be controlled by somebody else.
Right. And that's the safer place to be, right? It's not about, I want to be the boss of everyone in the room. It's about, I don't want anyone in the room to be the boss of me. So therefore I want to take the leadership position.
Yes. Yeah. So they would default to a leadership position purely because they don't want to have to report to somebody rather than, hey, I want to lead this team.
That would be, I guess it would depend on what the team is and how passionate they are about it. But I mean, generally you see a lot of 8s in leadership because they tend to make good leaders when they're healthy.
It's a catch-22 stereotype. They probably grew up being affirmed for that leadership that we in Western culture have as, you know, dominance. And so it's catch-22. You've got some leadership potential. You have the right wiring. People see it in you. You're affirmed. And then you're like, this is my spot. I'm just sort of here at the top. And there's an 8 that I know and love. And he just said, like it or not, I'm just a visionary. It's just where I end up in the room. And he's not being prideful as he says that. No. He's just like, people have told me I'm just in the first seat of the bus. That's just who I am. So he almost can't even get away from it if he wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that person that in a meeting, they typically get a really quick idea of where we're headed and how to get there. And so oftentimes they go, hey, I can see where we're headed and why we want to get there. And I can actually see the pathway to getting there. And so by default, they oftentimes help to lead the team to get there. So,
right. And they're thinking, why waste an hour sitting around figuring out who's going to lead the project? Like, let's just do this.
Let's do it.
Let's just run and do it. And I would say, I think it's important to point out too, because and I guess it depends on the kind of culture you grow up in. Like I said, 8s are not afraid of conflict, confrontation, that kind of stuff. Sometimes they seek it out, but sometimes it's just, if it comes up, they can handle it. But they want people to match their intensity. Right. So if you have an issue with an 8, if you're being passive aggressive or beating around the bush, they're getting frustrated and taking that as weakness. Like, just say what you have to say. Yep. And oftentimes people want to avoid the conflict, so they don't say the thing that they're really thinking. Yes. And 8s will say the thing, and they want you to just say the thing, and that won't destroy your relationship. Typically, it might actually improve it, because then they respect you for just speaking what you needed to say.
Yeah, it feels like that is too big a risk, and that is too much vulnerability. It turns out that is vulnerability, and that brings the relationship closer when you match an 8. So that's one of I think the hardest things probably about being in relationship, or at least leadership with an 8, is that's what they're longing for. Is come at me, bro. Let's have the right conversation afterwards. Oh, that was great. And you're thinking, that was exhausting. That was the worst.
Yeah,
and
the
yet
lead
they're
up
like,
to it,
oh, this
the
is
actual
great.
conversation. It was all exhausting. Yeah.
We did something.
Yeah, let's go.
I love it. Yeah. So they're gonna make great debaters. Like, they just would love a good debate, I imagine.
Sure. I would think that if you were growing up and just loved debate team, doesn't mean you're an 8, but it didn't hurt.
It's almost like they have psychological powers, because they just care less than the rest of us to just go for it, right? If conflict isn't that big an issue, you're like, this is fun. Why not?
Let's do it. Sure. Yeah, I love it. So talk to us a bit more about relationships, because Alan, you've talked about it from a workplace standpoint. But Julie, there's also the romantic relationship standpoint in a marriage situation, or even, with family members, that kind of thing. What are some of the keys to working well with an 8, and also 8s working well with others in relationships?
So I think we have to first be aware of our language of how we address people. I would say typically in most cultures, male 8s get called, assertive, commanding, good leaders, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Whereas female 8s get called bossy and other B words.
Yes.
And it seems more culturally acceptable for male 8s to fully be truly who they are, and less so for females. So, and I think this dynamic can also come out in relationships. If you are in relationship with a female 8, how are you encouraging and championing her in using her voice for truth, for advocacy, for the things that she was designed to do? Because that's why I think so many things that we used to think were just gender stereotypes. You understand these hardwiring dynamics, and it's not, oh, this is a job, or this is a thing for a man, and this is a job, or this is a thing for a woman. It's whose personality is best suited, or hardwiring is best suited for this role, or letting people really thrive in who God created them to be. If God created you as a truth teller with a bold voice, then finding areas or arenas where that is championed in you, and you learn to use that in a healthy way, right, is really important. So
yeah, for sure.
Big thing for 8s, because they have so much intensity and energy. Sometimes they can forget that the person they're in relationship with might not be able to match that intensity or that energy. So just having some discernment of knowing, when can I bring my full self, and when do I need to back off a little bit, because, for the sake of my partner who has a different level of, or who can handle a different level of intensity. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Being challenged all the time is not a game for everyone.
Right. Sometimes we just want to be. Yeah.
I don't need to be challenged on every decision. I'd just like to make one and be okay with it. So
yeah. exactly. But eights really are, lovers of justice, and
Mm.
um, they want to feel alive, but they, as I mentioned before, they need to be very aware of their anger, right? And make sure that it's coming out in the right places and in the right directions, and not causing hurt or pain in their closest relationships.
Yeah.
So one
Yeah.
thing to kind of boggle your mind is, an eight, you often think of a commanding male presence,
Yeah.
but think
Yeah.
about Mother Teresa. Mother
Yes.
Teresa being an eight, and so she used her voice and her little frame
Yes.
to be an advocate for the least. And so I think that that's helpful, because often that's the first thing that we picture, but that's actually just not helpful overall.
Because you're really describing there, Alan, you're talking about a healthy eight in a sense with Mother Teresa, who I think had some ridiculous, soul care practices of that idea of, hey, just spend an hour every day with Jesus, and it's like, wow, an entire hour just hanging out with Jesus. That will do something to temper your eightness or your sevenness or your threeness, or pick
Sure.
whatever
Yeah.
number you want.
Sure.
You're going to
Yep.
be a place of health. And then it wasn't just an hour every day with Jesus. I think she just abided in Christ throughout the entire day, which
Sure.
tempered that eightness
Sure.
maybe, or whatever. Yeah.
And maybe even you're already kind of segueing into soul care, even there.
Yeah.
With eights have a lot of energy. So what are you going to channel that for is the question.
Yes.
You're going to have energy
Yep.
as an eight, but the question is where are you going to channel that? Is it going to come back toward truth and toward justice, or the way that you want to approach truth, which maybe, powering up, or is there a better way in humility to approach that? So I think that's just the discernment piece, but solo time for eights is huge to be able to think and discern ahead of time, and to not just have to in the moment feel like I need to come up with something now. So there's a gatheredness to eights that I deeply respect that often go away to the mountain to get that clarity. Solitude and obviously silence are big practices.
Yeah, that's so big. So talk to us then about soul care specifically for the eight. If they struggle to lean into certain practices, for instance, what are some key things that you would say? Because, we've talked about on the podcast, we say this all the time, that, hey, we want people to achieve their goals without losing their souls. But actually, the secret of the podcast is we actually think that with not losing your soul is the goal. So talk to us about, okay, here's some ways to achieve your goals around soul care, but also be able to get those practical things done. Like you might be really passionate about advocating for some people group or some process or something that you really feel like needs to be protected. What does it look like to achieve that goal, but not lose your soul?
I think something that's really important, soul care specifically for type eights, is you have to find safe spaces and safe people to be vulnerable with. Okay. Because when you constantly have the armor up and like, I am the strong one, I am the, the protector, I am the challenger, I am the boss. We all have those soft, gooey centers, right? And eights are no exception. They have the external shell of hardness, but the internal is just as soft and gooey as any of the rest of us. Yeah. And so I think it's incredibly important for soul care for an eights that they find a counselor, a trusted friend, a loved one that they can be vulnerable with, that they can admit when they're sad, when they're hurt, when they're frustrated, when they're confused, and let that person hold that space for them without being afraid that now they're going to think I'm weak. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because that is a very protected space, especially for our eights. So having somebody taking that stuff to God, but having somebody, you got somebody in heaven, but having somebody on earth too, where you can cover all the angles of like being able to be vulnerable and know that that doesn't put your strength into question. In fact, that vulnerability will amplify your strength, because then it also gives you more empathy for other people and for those that you are, fighting for. So I think being vulnerable and having somebody that you feel safe to do that with is huge, huge.
And would you say, Julie, we're talking about a trusted guide, like a counselor or a coach or somebody like that? Or are you talking about, hey, surround yourself with like at least one or two or three really close friends who they don't give a rip about who you are or what you get done. They just love you and you can just be yourself around them during that. Is it a combination of the two?
Right. I would say it's take it wherever you can get it.
Okay.
I mean, you know, if your spouse can be that person for you, that's great. If you have a friend who could be that person for you, that's great. If you have a counselor who could be that person for you, you know, I don't think it matters as much who it is or even how many. I think even one is fine. Even just one safe space where you can show your soft, gooey center, but that helps open up a larger availability to do that more.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll probably find that as you do that with that one safe person, you may actually begin to do that with your team and in other places because you practice that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that idea too of like 8s getting out into nature, because 8s feel power. They like power. And so, excuse me, getting out into nature and observing all of God's power, right? Excuse me. And being reminded that like God controls all of this and me, and you know, when it rains and when it doesn't, and all of that, and being reminded that they don't have to hold it all, right? They don't have to hold it all together. God can do that for them.
I like to stand in a really powerful set of waves down at the beach almost every Sabbath, because it reminds me of how powerless I am, because they just beat you down and you're like, holy cow, there are millions of these very powerful forces happening simultaneously around the world. And I am this little tiny guy on one tiny little beach on the planet. And it's just a great perspective reminder of like, wow, God is so incredibly powerful. It's such
all right,
a great
podcast.
reminder.
You got a podcast from the beach. I can hear the waves in the background. You're
doing
getting pummeled by that.
Pummeled.
So that's your challenge next time, Perko.
Next time. All right. So let's dive into the 9. And Julie, this is going to be super fun because we're talking a little bit about your Enneagram type. So tell us kind of an overview of this type for those that are unfamiliar.
Well, I think it is an official rule now that 9 is the best type on the Enneagram.
I have to agree.
I took a poll.
Yes.
I literally have to.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we all have our yucky underbelly. Our 9s are usually called the peacemaker or the mediator.
Okay.
So essential qualities for our 9 is really wholeness, being, and unity. So 9's superpower is diplomacy and unconditional love. Okay. And part of that diplomacy, or the idea of mediator, is that 9s have this very natural way of just understanding both sides of a situation. Yeah. So this can be very helpful when you have, let's say, you know, countries or family members or, you know, whatever, who are disagreeing about ideas, who have different ways of seeing things, different ways of experiencing things. And the mediator can walk in and say, well, I understand where he's coming from, but I also totally understand where she's coming from. Maybe I can be a part of bringing people back together, right? That's where you get the mediator idea. But also because 9s have such a strong pull and desire for peace and harmony, both internally and externally, there can also be a tendency to just numb out. Like, there's too much conflict in the world, too much. I don't want to figure out what I think about this issue or how I really feel. So I'm going to, you know, grab my bag of popcorn and go binge watch Netflix for 9 hours because I just don't want to deal with it.
So they could when they're not in a healthy place, be people that tend to retreat, is what you're saying. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And really the basic fear for our 9s is of being disconnected or cut off. Okay. So, and obviously with that, then the desire is to be whole. They want things to be whole. They want inner peace. They want outer peace. They want to stay connected. So that is part of the tendency of the 9 to be passive aggressive or conflict avoidant, because there's so many things that a 9 might, you know, think or feel or want to say, But if I have an opinion on that and somebody else wants something different, then that could cause a problem or a conflict, and I would rather not deal with it. So therefore they become very chill, very go with the flow. Hey man, what do you want to do Friday night? Oh, I don't care. Whatever you want to do is cool. I'm just along for the ride, right? They're just always up for whatever everybody else wants to do. The pull of attention for a 9 is really on other people's agendas.
Okay.
So there's a pull of attention for all the types. We talked about, like, for the 2, it's really on other people's needs, right? That's what their focus of attention is on. And the focus of attention of a 9 is really on other people's agendas.
Okay.
So oftentimes people can have a hard time figuring out if they're a 2 or a 9 because they're both generally, nice people. Who,
generally, they're generally
they're
just
nice ones.
They're nice.
They're just
Everybody
generally
can be
people
nice,
you want to be around, like not like the others, like the sevens, for instance.
They're others focused.
Yeah.
And so, but the 2 is focusing on the needs of other people to get love.
Yes.
And the 9 is focusing on other people's agendas to just keep the peace. Like, I just don't want to ruffle the feathers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's just do, whatever you want to do. That's cool. I'm game for that.
Yeah.
So, and that emotional drive or vice for our 9s is called sloth.
Yeah.
And so a lot of 9s, all of us, we take offense to our drive, right?
Yeah.
But this idea of sloth or laziness, this is not talking about a physical laziness, right? Most 9s are actually very active, busy throughout the day. This is talking about a desire.
Because they're busy because they're going along with everyone else's agendas.
Right, exactly.
So
it takes a lot of work.
It does to keep up with everyone else.
It's this laziness of figuring out what are their own passions and agendas.
Yeah.
It's like, it takes too much energy to figure out what I really want, what I really want out of this, one precious life. So I'm just going to merge along with what other people want or what other people want for me. And that's really where we get this sense of sloth or laziness. It's this need to wake up and figure out, who are you? What do you want? Not just going along with everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. So Julie, where's that coming from? What's the fear for the 9? You said disconnectedness. Is that the thing that's driving it?
Yeah, really, it's really about a loss of connection. 9s tend to have this subconscious belief that, or question that they're asking of, like, does my presence really matter? Right? Does it really matter that I'm here? Is my voice important? Is my presence important? And so subconsciously 9s believe that if they just be really easy and agreeable, right? We all have these things that we pick up in childhood in order to survive. And some people become strong because no one will take advantage of me. And some people, over prepare for everything that could go wrong, or escape into fun and fantasy. And I think 9s as children really pick up this message that if I don't rock the boat, then life can stay pretty calm, or people don't have to, if people, I get rewarded for not being hard, for people not needing to spend extra time or energy on me. So if I can just float along, but then in that, as you grow up, you tend to feel like, well, I'm just floating along, therefore nobody notices me. Is my presence important here? Does it really matter? So it's really about this loss of connection. It's like, I'm not going to say what I really think because that might cause a disconnection.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm not going to do what I really want to do because other people will misunderstand me and that will cause a conflict.
Yeah. So the 8 would turn towards anger under that stressful situation. You said before that the 9s maybe go towards maybe resentment, bitterness, that type of thing. Is that what you?
Well, I would say resentment probably more on our 1s, but what 9s do is 9s are in complete denial of their anger.
Okay.
So most 9s have I'd say most 9s have no idea that they're angry people, because it's like easy going, go with the flow for so long. And then all of a sudden they erupt, right? Because they didn't let it leak out when it needed to. There's an eruption and then an immediate pullback of, that was too far, that was too much, I shouldn't have done that, I'm a horrible person, let's stuff all that anger right back down in there and keep going with the flow, right? So I like to joke around that.
I can tell you've never like had an eruption. And
Oh,
Alan's like,
not
oh,
an
no,
angry person. Well,
I'm not
that's what
angry.
I
She
like to.
wasn't, and then we have these humans, also called children.
Yes, I did
Yes.
not know that I was an
Poke at
angry
every
person.
button.
I did not know that I was an angry person until I had kids.
Wow.
Because I'm like, yeah, super, whatever, everything's chill. I'm fine, you're fine, we're all fine. And then all of a sudden, like this petty little bickering started disrupting the peace in my home.
Yeah.
And it would irritate me to no end because I'm
Yes.
thinking, if something is important, fight about it. That's fine. But who gets the remote control is not
It's
worth
not
disrupting
important.
the peace in my home. And so those little petty things would just send me through the roof. And I didn't
Yeah.
know why. Like, why is this such a trigger for me? Until
Yeah.
I learned more about the Enneagram and found my type and realized, oh, this is a trigger for me because something that I deem as petty and not important is
Yes.
disrupting the peace in my home, and that makes me feel so anxious.
Yeah.
And that phrase, your anger is a pathway to something that really matters to you.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
so helpful for the 9 because she began to look through that and go, oh, it's driving me crazy because we're a family. We should be loving each other. These little things shouldn't get in the way. And so
Yes.
I would encourage anyone, but especially 9s, to go, man, that anger was not a friend that I recognized either, but to go, oh, why is that? What is being violated or taken away from me right now? And that's been really helpful for us in our marriage as non-angry people who are trying to get used to anger and our children at the same time.
Where is that coming from? Yeah. Well, and it's basically you are allowing anger to define an expectation or a standard that you have. And so for you, Julie, you're saying, hey, my expectation and my standard is that the remote control is not something that we argue about. We argue about more important things than that, but not that. And then when that expectation or that standard is not being met, that's when that anger can come up. Yeah, that's so good.
And I think
so anger is the tool to define that for you.
Yes, because that's part of the growth process specifically for 9s is culture tends to tell us that anger is bad, right? Even religious culture, you can feel like anger is a sin. You're not allowed to be angry. You need to get rid of that as quickly as possible. And we need to use our anger in healthy, constructive ways, but it's a human emotion. Like there's no getting rid of anger. And I think because it tends to feel so uncomfortable for 9s, what we realize is that 9s identifying their anger is really part of their waking up process, because our anger is typically telling us that something is important to us.
Yeah.
So part of that retreating from the whole numbing out or pulling back or not thinking about things or not engaging things is for a 9 specifically is to realize this makes me angry. Okay, pause. Why? What is my anger trying to tell me about what's important to me right now? What is either being violated, or what are words or actions that I need to put forth that I'm not, and my anger is trying to tell me like, no, this is important to you and you need to, process if it's worth moving forward or not.
Yeah. You can then determine, once you identify what is the thing that's making you angry, hey, is that worth making me angry?
Right.
Is that worth getting angry over? Or actually, no, that is something that needs to be dealt with, but I can do it now in a healthy way rather than an explosive way because I've pushed pulled the emotional.
Realizing that conflict is a part of life. I mean, as much as a 9 might wish that it just never had to be, it's a part of relationships. It's a part of family dynamics. It's a part of culture. And so the goal should not be to make all conflict go away. We need conflict to improve lives, right?
Yeah.
To heal things. But so needing to find a space where you can feel comfortable in conflict, and it becomes about getting to a point of, and also letting other people be who they are.
Yeah.
I actually know quite a few 8s and 9s who are married to each other. People would think like, oh, that has to be a terrible combination. No, because the 9 can help soften the 8, and the 8 can help pull the important things out of a 9, right? So that relationship can work just fine if the 9 has to choose to engage, and then the 8, might have to soften a little bit.
Yeah. I have some friends that are a 3 and a 9. They're married to each other, and the 9 says all the time, hey, my 3 spouse helps me get some things done, because I can tend to be, let's just spend the day on Netflix and not do anything today. And also the 3 says all the time, like, I can really struggle to take a Sabbath, and my 9 spouse really helps me to just slow down and rest and relax.
And that works with any number, right? We can attempt to complement each other, with our different personalities, and it's great.
Okay, so this, I think, is going to be a tricky question for me to ask, because I don't want to step on any toes. That's the people pleaser coming out in me. So the 9, who tends to drift towards maybe the sloth, description, what does it look like for them to achieve goals? Do they have challenge? Do they struggle achieving goals because they're not as goal oriented, or is that something that they can overcome and no, it does come naturally?
I would say it really depends on if the goal is really theirs, or if it's a goal that they're taking care of for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because either it's somebody else's agenda, or it's something somebody else has put on them.
Yeah.
Those, if it feels put upon them, 9s have a very strong inner sense of boundaries and of stubbornness.
Yeah.
But again, it's that passive aggressive. It's like if a 9 feels put upon, or feels like they're being asked to do something that they didn't want to do, they might still agree to do it, right? Because of the conflict avoidance, but it's going to be last minute. It's not going to be their best effort. What are those little stubborn, passive aggressive ways of, I'm trying to tell you without actually telling you, this is not what I want to be doing.
Yes.
Right? But
I'm sitting down physically, but I'm standing up in my heart.
Yes, exactly. But if it's a goal or passion of the 9 themselves, which they have to do the work to figure out what those things are, then they will run after it.
I've seen 9s ignited through coaching, because that's the process of the pulling out. We use the phrase, what are you uniquely designed to do? Who has God uniquely designed you as? And that's powerful for everyone. But this was like the first time this guy had even thought that way, or felt permission at least to think that way, and ultimately ignited him. And he's one of the most goal-driven people who I know, that you have to tell him, actually stop doing things and getting things done. You're crushing it too much. I don't want you to get crushed. So I think that's one of those false misconceptions of 9s. But man, it's fun to watch 9s really own, like, yes, this is what I'm going to run after. This is what I'm going to do. And it's pretty magical when it happens.
Yeah, no, it's so good. So talk to us about soul care, Julie. And I would love it if you'd just get really like personal and say, hey, these are the things that I find really effective practices for me personally.
Yeah. Well, I would say similar to the 2 in the sense of saying no.
Yes.
Right? Because 9s tend to be people pleasers, right? I don't want to let anybody down. So I'm going to say yes whenever somebody asks me of something. But I think the more we can connect with our own inner like needs, then it's easier to say no to other people. So for example, I really like sleeping late. Now, it does not happen often because, 4 kids and school and work and all the things. But I got really used to sleeping in during all the COVID at home. And that was a hard one to let go of. But because I know that sleep feels so necessary and important to me, I guard Saturday mornings with my life. If anybody says, hey, do you want to do this thing? Hey, could you help me with this project? Like, hey, could you whatever? And if it's on a Saturday, like before 11, I'm getting up before 11. I just don't want to do things before 11. Then I say no. And I used to feel guilty about it, or I used to say, okay, let's just do it because that person is important and I want to help them out. But I've learned that like, it's okay for, not only is it okay for me to say no, it's good for me to say no because I need that day to replenish my soul, right? And my body. Yeah. So that's
by the way, Julie,
holding to boundaries. Yeah.
By the way, Julie, if you want to sleep until 11, you go ahead and
you
sleep
won't judge
until
me.
11. Permission granted. Like, don't have to say, hey, I get up before 11, but I'm just doing other things. I'm free to sleep in.
I mean,
my teenagers do it all the time. They do it all the time. So,
Right.
no,
It's
it's
just,
good.
we're just taking care. So
Yeah.
I would say to be careful to stay aware of the times when we're tempted to zone out,
Okay.
right? When we feel like things are rising
Yeah.
and we just want to back off and numb and unplug.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean unplugging is unhealthy, right? We all need to, introvert every now and then, have some alone time, watch the favorite show and not feel bad about the project you haven't finished yet. Like, we all need that downtime, but there's a difference between downtime to replenish and I am numbing from something that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great filter then to ask maybe a loved one or someone that really cares about you. Hey, have I been retreating to replenish lately? Or do you feel like I've been retreating to just numb out the pain? Because I don't want to cross that line.
Yeah. And then follow that bunny trail. Like, what am
Yeah.
I numbing out from? Can I name it? Why am I numbing out? What am I afraid of? And part of that, I think soul care for nines as well, is recognizing that to investigate their anger.
Yeah. Okay.
What is my anger trying to tell me? What do I need to do about it? Processing it out slowly so that you don't have these eruptions that then you pull back, then feel guilty about, and then you pull back and I'll never be an angry person again. No, how can you vent frustration in a healthy, productive way because you're a normal human who feels frustrated and upset? But also, like I said, part of that waking up process for 9 is believing that I have things that are supposed to be put out there into the world. And sometimes my way of discovering what those things are is through listening to what my anger is telling me.
Yeah. I'm hearing some themes through every single number. And you guys are probably laughing because you're on the inside. You're like, Perko, you're such a novice. Yes, those are the themes, but it's all good. I'm hearing, hey, slowing down and being more contemplative of what you're feeling, where the anger is coming from, why am I fearful? For every number, these are the practices that really will help you to identify what is the best way to be as the healthiest version of yourself that you can possibly.
Yeah, and really pausing to remember the inherent worth that we wake up with every single day, that God has given us, that we have in Jesus, because every single number is seeking that worth in a different way, by being easy and agreeable, by taking care of other people, by being positive and fun, by feeling like
getting
they're loved for
done.
what they do. Yes, we're all pulled towards finding our value somewhere else. And so we're all struggling to figure out how to not only get it, but to maintain it. And it's just exhausting, and it's not going to take us anywhere positive. So remembering that we wake up every single day with value because we are children of God, and that cannot be taken away from us by what conflict we're in, who we say no to, what job we didn't finish, what we didn't do the right way, all of that. I mean, that's good soul care.
Yeah. My wife and I have recently started a practice of speaking declarations and affirmations every morning over our lives and over the lives of our children before we get started with our day, before the day gets going and we seek to find our identity and worth in things that are not necessarily true. Yeah. And it's been such a life-giving practice for us to just ground ourselves before we become human doers, just be a human being at first as a child of God, get our identity in Christ set in stone once again, recenter, and then get on with the day. So no, it's so good.
And I would also say that Alan has learned that he has to give me choices and options. Because one last thing that's typically true of nines is we have an easier time identifying what we don't want than identifying what we do want.
Okay.
So
process of elimination is good for you guys. Yeah.
Well, and if Alan says, where do you want to go for dinner?
Yeah.
My mind is blank because I'm like, there are legitimately 100 restaurants in town. I don't know where I want to go to dinner, but also I'm subconsciously thinking, I wonder where he wants to go.
Yeah.
Is he in the mood? What if I say Italian and then he really wanted Mexican and then that's a thing? So he'll just say, He'll give me 3 options. Hey,
There's
would you
3
rather go to
options.
this place or
And
this
I
place?
literally don't care. My stomach is thinking. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted just thinking about all the things she's thinking about to go. And I'm like, literally, just
Well,
take
but
it.
most of it isn't even subconscious. It's just like when somebody says,
Yeah.
what do you want to do? It's all of a sudden, oh, I don't, well,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'll do
yeah.
that.
Options.
And
Yeah.
Alan's like, you know what? Doesn't matter where we go. I'm going to order 3 of everything anyway. So
That's
That's
right.
it'd be awesome.
I mean, as long as they have tacos and many of
Yeah.
them, we're good.
Yeah, we're totally good.
No, we get flights, so you don't have to choose. Just a little
Yeah.
bit of everything.
I still believe the flight was invented for the 7 and by a 7 probably. So
Oh, I'm sure.
Amen.
It's brilliant.
And amen.
hey, because of the time, and I hate doing this because Julie, I love talking with people that are sharing about their number because I feel like they're obviously a wealth of information about that, especially if they're coming from a healthy position like I believe you are. So let's do the 1. And as we wrap this up, what are some of the key things about the 1 that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so our 1s are probably feeling gypped because they're number 1 on the Enneagram, but they had to wait till the very end to hear
Yes.
about themselves.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
1s are frequently called the reformer or the idealist.
Okay.
They just have this way of seeing how things should be in order to
Yeah.
be at their best, right?
Yeah.
Some essential qualities are really goodness, purity, and sacredness. So their superpower is alignment. It's figuring out how to make everything align and make sense, whether that's beliefs, actions. Their inner fear, basic fear, is of being bad or corrupt. And because of that, they want to be, that desire is to be above criticism, to like striving for perfection, right? When a 1 walks into a room, they can immediately spot like what's off, what's missing. It could be as simple as that painting is crooked, or it could be as specific as like there's something in this org chart that isn't working and we need to rearrange some things. They just have this vision for seeing how things should be and how things could be. And so they strive to make that a reality in their environment.
Okay. Yeah. So that could be really frustrating for them if they're in a relationship or working with people that chaos is like okay with them, or is even, you know, not just accepted, but celebrated. You know, that could be really challenging.
Because 1s care so much about doing things the right way. It can definitely cause a lot of frustration in them to when they look at other people and they see other people don't care. And that can feel very frustrating.
Yeah.
They just, they see there's a right way. They tend to be a little bit more black and white, right and wrong. And because they can so clearly see the right way to do something, it can feel very frustrating to them that other people don't seem to care. It can almost feel unfair. Like a 9 isn't going to cut, or sorry, a 1 is not going to cut any corners, right? They're going to do things the right way. They're going to do things the way that they are meant to be done. They're going to cross the T's and dot the I's. And that's an urgency placed in them by God, right? We need people who can scan the horizon for what is the vision? What is the ideal? How can we strive towards that? How can we improve things and make things better? Whether that's people or organizations or the earth or anything. It's just, they have this inner pull to make things better.
Yeah.
How do you get the right to not care, right? Because it's, you know, it's sort of this burden that they carry with them.
Yeah. Are they frustrated then oftentimes? Can they be somewhat frustrated people because chaos is everywhere. And so we're so broken, you know, I think of my own life and I just immediately think to myself, man, I don't do things the right way and in the right order. And it frustrates me, and I'm not a 1. I can only imagine frustration must be a thing.
I think absolutely. I mean, I had a conversation with the 1. She said as a child, she was an artist. She loved painting. She said she would take out a new canvas and she would paint something. And then like, you know, right at the end in the corner, she would make some sort of mistake. And she said she would whitewash the whole thing and start all over. And everyone else went, oh, it's paint. You could literally just cover it up and no one ever would have seen the mistake. And her response was, but I would always know it was there.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the biggest gifts that if you are a 1 or if you are in relationship with a 1, to recognize that they care a lot about whatever it is they care about. But here's the thing. If you view them as being critical or judgmental about how things are done, they are way harder on themselves than they ever are on other people. Yeah, so if they're being critical of you, that's just a tiny little drop in the bucket of the criticism that they heap on themselves every day. All day. And they did not choose to care that much. That is an urgency built inside of them.
Yeah, and that's that internal anger, whereas 8, you're feeling it out. If they're angry, it means they've already been angry at themselves first. And so actually I get the emotion of sadness. I feel sad for a lot of ones to think through, man, that'd be rough if A was never good enough and it was always need to be A plus. So I think empathy for ones who we know and love would be really, really helpful. And this is something I've been learning and very convicted. The ones that I love, man, I need to be more empathetic instead of sensing that as criticism.
Yeah, totally. Go ahead, Julie. I sense you were about to say something.
Well, I've heard it said several times. I think ones as kids are often viewed as little adults. Okay. Because they're responsible. Yeah. Right? They're going to, like adults tend to look on them as children and be like, oh, we don't have to worry about that one. They're good. Yes. They do what they're told. They, they're getting good grades. They can watch the other kids and they won't let them do anything stupid. Like they tend to be more responsible. They're, more structured. They will do what they say they will do. They're hardworking. And so very, very, very valuable contributing members to families and to societies. But the thing that is difficult about our ones, for them to endure themselves, is that ones have an inner critic, right? And we maybe all have some sort of inner critic, like, oh, that was a bonehead move. I shouldn't have done that. But ones have a voice in their head that is always letting them know, you didn't do that right. You could have done that better. That wasn't done the right way. Did you say the right thing? And this was mind-boggling to me once I heard a Christian say to me, they discovered later in life that about the Enneagram and that they were a 1. And they said, growing up in a Christian environment, I was taught that the voice in my head was the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking the same thing, Julie. I'm thinking about that person that grew up. I was thinking the exact same thing, where it's like, man, you would be constantly feeling like God is upset with you.
Right. You're never good enough. Yeah. Right. God is always mad at me. I never measure up. And it takes this level of discernment to figure out, what is this voice saying to me? I know many, many people who have given their inner critic a name, so that in that moment they can say, let's say my inner critic was Bob, is this my conscience, right? Is this the Holy Spirit? Is this Bob? Do I need to listen to what Bob is saying and then say, thanks, Bob, but I, politely disagree? Yes. Right. Yeah. If what that voice is telling you is not for your good, right, then it's probably not the Holy Spirit. And I've heard many ones say, your inner critic is not your friend. Yeah. So good. Because it is harsh on you.
Yeah. Poor Bob, because I was immediately, when you said that they give them a name, immediately Bob's name came to my mind as well. And I feel sorry for Bob.
Sorry, Bob.
Bob always gets blamed.
He's like the unwanted neighbor that keeps showing up at your house. Get out of here, Bob.
Right, but I'll tell you what, like I want a 1 flying my airplane, right? Yeah. I want a 1 coming into my organization and telling me how to improve things. I want a 1 leading the charge on, improving the environment and changing and reform.
If
and all
you
that
are
kind of
one
stuff.
listening to this, just side note, selfishly, I am looking for administrative help. Yes. So please reach out to me quickly. I need your help desperately.
Yes. And we'll give you the contact information at the end of the show, but feel free to fast forward through the podcast so you can get a hold of Alan immediately.
Because he's a 7 and he's scattered.
Yeah. And he's got tacos that he needs delivered, and he needs an administrator to help him get those things delivered. Hey, let's talk through then in relationship, because you said, Alan, a minute ago, you talked about growing that empathy muscle if you've got a 1 in your life. What about, Julie, you've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but what muscle or what thing in relationship do you feel like the 1s need to be growing for those around them? Because it seems like, I'm going to go out on a limb here, they maybe come across as a little bit critical, possibly.
Sure. And again, that's part of the heap criticism on themselves. And so sometimes that spills out on other people and it's also like about rightness and fairness and goodness, right? They want other people to also care about those things. Just like we all have stuff that feels important to us that we want other people to care about as well.
Yeah.
So I think ones in relationships need to recognize and acknowledge and accept the fact that to some regard, other people just aren't going to care as much as you do.
Yeah.
And
just be aware of that. Yeah.
And that's not a character flaw.
Yeah.
No,
and it's not because there's something wrong with them.
No, it's just the way that they're wired. It's not right or wrong. It's just different. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
Absolutely. So I would say, because ones tend to have a very strong moral compass, sometimes we need to remember, that other people are hardwired different from me. I don't know their life experiences. I don't know what they've been through, so maybe I see someone making bonehead decisions and can feel critical or judgmental of them for not doing the right thing. But taking a step back and recognizing that those core differences and that they're important, because we're all hardwired a little bit differently because we're all so needed.
Yeah. They may have to put on repeat. Gray is a color. Gray is a color. Just repeat that to yourself.
And
not everything is black and white.
Having grace and compassion on themselves and realizing that if they make a mistake, that's okay.
Yeah.
The striving to be good enough, like sometimes a project, sometimes good enough is good enough, right? Sometimes you got to let it go. Sometimes you need to move on because it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, I think the difference between excellence there and perfection.
Yeah.
And I think excellence just being the best you can do in that moment with the resources you've been given and being able to just go for it. It can be hard for a one to, publish that blog, finally say this is done. There's trepidation because it's like, well, it can never be changed. And then, well, often it can, right? You can just go change your post and edit it. But there's this like, oh man, this huge pressure that they feel. So we can be empathetic to that. But I think just to say to go for it. The second one can be a lot for other people to process. And sometimes it's just intimidating. I don't know how they do all that, or that feels tiring to me. And so I think sometimes that's other people maybe whispering, hey, take a break. Hey, relax a little bit. And I know that that's hard. Maybe it feels like a catch-22, but man, when one's kind of relaxed, I think it puts everybody at ease.
Yeah. So Alan,
just be.
if I'm a one and I'm thinking towards goal completion, do you recommend in your coaching, like, hey, you know what? 85% for you is actually 100% for most people. Like, is there something there?
I did this today where I realized they were dejected because their view of succeeding was literally losing X amount of pounds so they could have this increase in energy. And I went, wait a minute, let's question the assumption that success equals, that sounds like a crazy amount of discipline in this season of life when you have kids. So yes, I've also heard ones also kind of say, well, I know the right answer should be this, but I'm actually thinking this. So almost always will, kind of throw that statement out. I know what the right thing is, but I know I should actually pay my mortgage down, but my wife and I are going to take a small vacation. It's like, no, stop saying that. Go take a small vacation. So I think often they can even lose out on some of the joy or the goals because they're like, well, I know I should have lost 40 pounds, but 27 ain't bad. And so just that struggle to celebrate. So I think celebrating progress with ones is huge because they want the completion of that goal that feels like success or performance.
A side note, ones on vacation are super fun because one of the things that we didn't have time to get into in all of these is, those lines on the Enneagram joining different numbers together. Ones really in health, they have access to travel that line to 7. And ones on vacation, when it's not like I'm in this place where I have to this, that, or the other, tend to be able to just relax and let go and are great.
Maybe the soul care there is where can you just be, or relational? Where can you just be and feel like the environment where I don't have to make the decisions or be in control and I don't feel stressed out by that. Maybe you need to treat yourself to those kind of environments and what people will just let you be So
Yeah.
you don't have to continue to improve and perform.
So the weekly Sabbath goal then of the one, in a sense, should be just have a day where you can just be. You're not responsible. You don't have to be productive. You don't have to get it right. Like you can paint that picture. And even if you don't get it completed, come back next Sabbath and you can finish it off then. Like that's the goal, is to just be in an environment where you can just be. So
Yeah.
good.
I think that's really healthy, and along those lines of soul care and things to do, is really to practice self-compassion, right? Be
Uh-huh.
kind to yourself, because you get enough of the inner critic. So be kind to yourself, right? Like take a break, go on a vacation, do
Yeah.
something fun, even if it seems irresponsible. Allow yourself to make mistakes without it questioning your worthiness as a human. And really inside of that, I think my last thing for soul care is that I heard this said once and I'm like, that is perfect. Ones really need the serenity prayer, right?
Okay.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
Yeah.
the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
can be a very healing word for our ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spiritual mic drop of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I love what you said, something there just a minute ago, Julie. You talked about giving yourself permission to make mistakes. I've heard somebody once say that they give themselves a certain amount of mistakes every week or every day, which allows them to just go for it.
Without feeling bad. Yeah.
Yes. And they literally carry these little tickets or whatever it is, that these mistake things that they have that they get to use up, because then it allows them to go for it on certain things that they wouldn't go for it on usually, because they're nervous they'd make a mistake.
You find what works for you, because it was like that idea we talked about with the sixes. If you give yourself 30 seconds to catastrophize and to let your mind go there, and then you move on. If a one plans on making a mistake, then they're doing something wrong if they don't make a mistake. So you better make some mistakes.
Yeah. So go after that thing that you know is risky, because you've given yourself permission to make a mistake on that anyway. Yeah, that's so good. I love that. Well, listen, this has been so good. And Julie, you brought something up that immediately my mind went to. I'm like, okay, we've got to do another set of these in 6 to 12 months from now and talk about the lines that connect the numbers, because we all have wings and we all have things that we go to in health and things that we go to when we're not healthy. And so I would love us to be able to dive into that conversation at a later date for each of the numbers. But thank you guys so much for your time. How can people connect with you guys online? Because I know that you guys have a website and you've got ways to contact you on social media and so on. And then my second question is, if you could only pick, and this may be difficult, 2 to 3 resources for people to take a next step with the Enneagram, what would they be?
Yeah, I'll connect you guys. Especially Julie and I do trainings for teams. Julie does teams and even some coaching around this for individuals who are really interested. Just head over to stayforth.com, stayforth.com, click the Enneagram tab, and Zoom trainings are actually quite fun and formative as well. So Julie's been doing a lot of Zoom trainings in this season.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And Julie, is that how we connect with you? The website?
Yeah, you can connect with me through the website. We also have, Alan at stayforth.com. It's ALAN. It's the cool way to spell Alan. And Julie at stayforth.com for our email addresses. I would say, so there is 20, 30 years ago, there was like 3 books on the Enneagram.
Yes.
Now the resources are countless. So I would really say it depends on how you learn and how you dive into information.
Okay,
if you want beginner books, then something like The Road Back to You is a great place to start. And then, you can move on to The Path Between Us, which was by Suzanne Stabile. There's more textbooky type stuff, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. There are countless books. If you do better with audio, I know I listened to a ton of podcasts while I was driving in the car. And so you can literally just go to your podcast, app on your phone and type in the Enneagram, and there will be so many resources. I personally, if you want bigger, deeper, deep life-changing training. I know I personally have been working on certification through the narrative Enneagram, and that is a tradition. They're a school, they're doing a lot of stuff online now. That is a tradition where you learn about the numbers by exactly what you were saying earlier, by hearing from the numbers themselves, which I firmly believe is the best way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of getting a lecture about ones, you hear from ones,
from
like
one.
a panel of ones telling you about their own life experience.
Absolutely.
And I think that's beautiful, because then we mess up less. I'm sure I've said things that some people will say like, oh, I don't know if that applies to me, or that's not really how I feel. And so, and so that's the same with the podcast. If you're listening to interviews of each number, you're hearing that number talk about their experience in the world. So I really think that's a great jumping off point of where to start.
Maybe just three things to end with. The first one, it's okay if you don't know your number yet, or if you haven't settled on that. Even you, Perko, coming in, and investigating and saying, oh man, there's pieces of this, piece of that. So it's okay. Keep digging. There's a lot of people who it took them a long time to get down to it. So that's where it's not just an assessment. Second one, don't use this as an excuse not to pursue goals, not to rest, not to whatever. We can all find an excuse in the Enneagram. The last one, please don't use this as a weapon, because it gives us, sort of secret information about somebody else where we could really wrongly use that and wound somebody. And so not an excuse, not a weapon. And guys, there's no rush to get to your number.
Yeah. Life is not a race. So live at a slower pace, including your Enneagram number. Like, just take your time. And I'm living proof of that. I'm still taking my time with it, because I waffle between a 3 and a 7 all the time. And so that's why I actually think I'm a 37, but that's okay. I don't think the Enneagram has enough slots for that. Yeah, exactly. You do you, boo. Hey, thank you guys so much for your time and investment. It's been so fun, these conversations. And until next time, those that are listening, thanks for listening to Perko's podcast. Cheers.